Privacy takes a major hit in the UK with end-to-end encryption possibly at risk, and Signal is in the headlines not once but twice this week. So we have a battle of good and evil this week. For Surveillance Report 215, where we are dedicated to keeping you private and secure, the latest news in the past week. Thank you for being here. I'm Henry from Techlore.
I'm Nathan from The New Oil.
We always want to showcase the amazing people who make this podcast possible, which is all of you. We are on Patreon where you can join and you get access to an extended version where we give a lot more feedback, a lot more analysis on these stories if you appreciate our insight into this stuff. We also have a private Signal group that we are a big fan of and will probably be expanding soon as well. We also are on Liberapay if you don't like Patreon for whatever reason. And we also support direct questions through either Patreon or XMR chat. So if you want to join our Q&A, which we do midweek every week, you can do that by joining patreon.com/surveillancepod or going to XMR chat. These are all down in a description. And with XMR chat, you can essentially just send some Monero and include a question, and then we get to see those. And they're pretty much completely anonymous to us. So really cool way for you to be a part of what we do, support what we do, keep it going, and helping us reach more and more people while we give you some perks in the process. And with that said, let's dive right into the highlight story. So Apple is pulling end-to-end encryption in the UK, which is spurning backdoors for government spying. So there's a lot to the story, by far the biggest story. And this actually happened today. It's Friday when we're recording. So the context here is the UK demanded that Apple created a backdoor that would allow governments to spy on encrypted data. The way I'm putting this is Apple had three options. One, they could take their entire company and all their products out of the UK. Two, they could just remove their feature that they're specifically targeting. Or three, they could build a backdoor and do this secretly. They've chosen the middle path. So Apple's decided to turn off encryption services in the UK, specifically ADP. I do believe that this does not apply to things that are normally end-to-end encrypted with iCloud, which include Apple Health, iMessage, and Keychain, and things like that. I think those always have end-to-end encryption, and I don't think that's at risk.
I have that list in the last paragraph. You're correct.
Okay, cool. Thank you. The UK Investigatory Powers Act, which we've covered on this podcast before, so anyone who's been on this podcast for a long time will know, but this is something we've already warned you all about. It's been dubbed the Snooper's Charter, and it's granting the UK government powers to access the encrypted data of Apple customers anywhere in the world, including the US. So this isn't just a UK problem, and this is much more than a UK problem because it sets a precedent for so many other countries to start attacking this now that they know what Apple will do in a situation like this. So according to Apple, complying with the UK law could have enabled not just government officials, but also bad actors to gain access to encrypted data. Critics, including the US tech industry group, the Computers and Communications Industry Association, had further warned that the recent Salt Typhoon breach, which we've also covered on this podcast extensively, had made it clear that end-to-end encryption may be the only safeguard standing between American sensitive personal and business data and foreign adversaries. So again, when you build a backdoor into these things, like we saw with Salt Typhoon, there is no mathematical guarantee that the backdoor can only be accessed by the good guys. The only mathematical guarantee we can have is through end-to-end encryption, which guarantees that a user's data is only with them. The moment you open up any kind of hole for anyone else to try to get into that personal data, anyone can theoretically exploit it. Now, for UK Apple users, some data is still encrypted, like I already mentioned, but other iCloud services that ADP was protecting will no longer have encryption, which includes iCloud Backup, iCloud Drive, Photos, Notes, Reminders, Safari bookmarks, Siri shortcuts, voice memos, wallet passes, and Freeform. These are all things that ADP was previously protecting, and you can still use in other countries. So we do still recommend enabling ADP if you're using iCloud for whatever reason in another country. In the future, Apple hopes to restore data protections in the UK, but the company refuses to ever build a backdoor for government officials. Now, a lot of personal takes I'm sure we're going to have here. I've actually already begun the process of editing a video, so I've already kind of formed my thoughts on this quite a bit. First off, I'm seeing a lot of polarized takes because Apple did kind of take the middle ground here. Some people think Apple didn't go far enough and should have threatened to completely pull out of the UK. And some people think that Apple, well, I guess, I don't know, no one thinks they should have built the backdoor.
Some people think they should have just stayed and fought. There's a few different takes, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think given their situation, I think most companies would have done what Apple did. I saw Proton go on Twitter and they were like, we're a Swiss company. We don't have to do any of this. And I actually responded and I said, well, what would you do if you were in this situation? And they said, well, we haven't decided yet. We don't know yet. So it's easy to be a service and go, this doesn't impact us, but this impacts everybody. And this is not an attack against Apple. This is an attack against encryption. This is how this must be labeled and advertised and talked about. This is the UK attacking encryption. Today it's Apple, tomorrow it's Proton. The next day it's Tuda. The next day it's you using Cryptomator on your own machine. So this is such a dangerous precedent that's being set. And Apple, I think, has actually done as much as they can without the nuclear option of just pulling out of the entire market in the UK, which wouldn't change anything for UK users, would it? It wouldn't. Then UK users just lose all access to the devices altogether. So I think that Apple has compromised as best as they can, personally. I know that's kind of debated right now, but it sucks to see things moving in this direction. I did get a few questions that I'll just quickly cover before I move it to Nate. People have been asking if they can bypass this. Probably not. If we can look at the DMA in Europe as an indication of what this is going to look like, they don't just use your IP address. So you can't just use a VPN and now get access to ADP. They use things like your cell towers that you're connecting to, your billing address and your credit card billing address and the country of origin of those things. So this is a much more thorough kind of way that they're trying to see which country you're in. So this isn't going to be something you can just easily get around. And the most important thing, if you're in the UK and you have ADP enabled, you already can't enable ADP if you never turned it on. So that's already disabled by the time you're listening to this. But if you already had ADP enabled, you will still have end-to-end encryption. You still have it right now, most likely by the time you're listening to this, hopefully on Sunday. But you need to act quickly because it's already been confirmed that Apple is going to somehow keep people away from their iCloud accounts. They can't force enable this as of right now, but what they're saying is most likely what I'm imagining is they're going to shut you out from your iCloud account unless you disable the feature on your own device. So you need to start moving your data over right away. Like the moment you're listening to this, start finding end-to-end encrypted alternatives to what you have in ADP. And if you're outside the UK, I still think ADP is a great platform. I still think that this is just a reminder that you need to have backups in place if any of your core services are taken away from you, whether it's a messenger, a browser, or anything. Have backups ready. And I will now leave it with Nate.
I don't really have too much to add, actually. I agree with you. I'm not going to be too mad at Proton for taking this moment to do a little marketing because that's just kind of how it goes. It's not like anybody died or anything yet. So it's not in terribly bad taste, but I agree with you that this is the slippery slope we always talk about. And sure, today it's Apple in the UK. Tomorrow it's Tuda in Germany, then it's Proton in Switzerland. It's, it creates that precedent. Like that's the whole argument that Apple made when they said they didn't want to backdoor things in the first place is like, sure, today it's the quote unquote good guys here in the West. And then tomorrow it's not necessarily straight up regimes, but it's kind of shady countries that maybe don't have the best track record. And then after that, it is straight up Turkey that murdered a journalist in a foreign country and dismembered him just to prove they could. I do 100% agree with you challenging Proton of like, okay, but what would you do if this was? And I think that's a fair answer. We haven't decided, but I hope they're having that discussion. And I think everybody else should have that discussion too, like with themselves. Like for those of you who are not in the UK, like Henry was saying, this is kind of your call to think, what if this service went away or demanded to pull out or remove their encryption or whatever the case may be? What would your backup be? The one thing I wanted to add, so it says in the end of the article that I think you may have mentioned this. In the future, Apple hopes to restore data protections in the UK. I read several articles about this story, and none of them really elaborated on what that meant. For some reason, I wasn't able to find Apple's original statement to see. It probably would have been much clearer. But that's one thing I've seen some people say is like, well, maybe Apple's pulling out right now while they fight the order. And I really hope they do, and I hope they win because yeah, this is a really bad precedent. And I cannot believe that Salt Typhoon has literally happened and there's still idiots out there who are saying a backdoor that only the good guys can use. Like, this is literally, and I'm making this analogy up off the top of my head, so it's probably terrible and I'm sorry, but like, this is literally like getting hit in the face with a baseball and being like, nobody ever gets hit in the face with a baseball. How can you even argue this? I shouldn't be surprised by this, that there are people who just refuse to acknowledge the reality that has been proven in front of them. But here we are. Welcome to the post-truth society.
Actually, the thing I'm most upset about out of all of this is a lot of people are missing the point. I saw a lot of comments saying, this is why I use this operating system instead of Apple. And it's like, you're missing the whole point of this, actually. Like, you can use iCloud on most operating systems, and this would impact every operating system. You can use the most private, secure operating system in the world, and if you use any end-to-end encrypted cloud provider on that, this now concerns you. So I think people really need to see this for what it is. It's an attack on encryption. It's not an attack on an operating system. It's not an attack on anything. I think the one thing that I do wish Apple would do, and this is where people have a completely valid point, Apple needs to open up iOS. If Apple allowed other cloud providers to integrate into the operating system the way iCloud does, this wouldn't be as big of a deal, because then someone goes, crap, iCloud, no more end-to-end encryption. Good thing I have 5 other options that can hook into my OS the same exact way. Just like Mac OS, just like Android, just like all these other, well, nothing integrates on Android. So that is equality in its own way, because good luck having like a system-wide end-to-end encrypted cloud provider on Android. It just doesn't really exist. There are fantastic end-to-end encrypted drive providers on Android. There are end-to-end encrypted contacts providers, but it's like one thing for every specific thing you need done.
That's what I was thinking when you were saying like, oh, you need to find alternatives for these. Like, I don't know anything on Android that does health. Well, health stays encrypted, but yeah, like Siri shortcuts, bookmarks, reminders. Like, okay, we have drive, photos, notes, arguably backups, wallet passes. Like, come on.
Yeah. You can't get this on Android right now, but it sucks because Android has the openness to accommodate something like this. It's just no one's really done it. And so I wish that Apple would just open up theirs, and then maybe we can see a few more providers. And this is my same argument for Apple not allowing third-party apps. It means that governments can just say, we don't want this app. You know, it means China goes, oh, we don't want Signal. Signal is banned on the App Store in China, which means iOS users in China literally can't get Signal. There is no way for them to get Signal or any other end-to-end encrypted messenger. Same thing with Russia. You can't download a VPN app from the App Store. And there's no other way to really, I guess you might be able to load like profiles inside of your phone, but there's no like way to sideload applications. And this is a dangerous thing that Apple does, which sets them up and puts a target on the back of their heads for government censorship. It's enabling government censorship all around the world because Apple refuses to open up the iOS ecosystem. Just another place where I think Apple needs to really get their crap together.
I might keep this in. That's actually one of the things that bugs me about when I was younger and I was exploring different political ideologies, which I still do to an extent for the record. Obviously, I try to keep an open mind. But like that was something that bugged me about the Libertarian Party is I like that idea of like small government should leave everybody alone as much as possible. But the one thing I noticed is all of them were like whenever it was anything, like any sort of civil rights, any sort of like anything, if they were like, oh, am I directly being attacked? Nope, not my problem, staying out of it. And it's like, no. If other people are getting their rights stepped on, you should stand up on principle alone, because it's like that poem about the Holocaust. It's only a matter of time before they come for you. So what you were saying at first about all those people who are like, oh, that's why I use Android. That's why I use this. It doesn't matter. This is an attack on encryption. Like you said, you can't just sit back and go, oh, well, I'm not an Apple user, so sucks to suck, scrub. Like you're next in the crosshairs, buddy. Yeah, that attitude bugs me so much, whether it's politics, whether it's encryption, whether it's whatever it is. Like, don't have that attitude. We're all in this together, man. They're coming for you at some point.
No, fully agree. I think it's well put.
With all that out of the way, we'll go ahead and jump into our data breaches. And our first one comes from an Australian in vitro fertilization giant called Genia, who confirmed hackers accessed data during a cyber attack. This company has 21 clinics across the country, and they disclosed that the incident disrupted patient services and potentially exposed sensitive information. Unfortunately, they haven't really said much else. They haven't said how many people were impacted or exactly what data was impacted, but they did confirm that the data was accessed. And obviously, they are an IVF clinic, so they would collect things like sensitive health information, medical data, and procedures, probably contact information, SSNs, that kind of stuff. So we'll update you if we hear more, but that's definitely not looking good.
UK back again with a healthcare giant, HCRG, who was confirmed a hack after a ransomware gang claims theft of sensitive data. So this is a provider of community health and care services in the UK, and this incident was reported after a ransomware gang breached their systems to steal this data. This is from the Medusa ransomware group. They listed all this data on the dark web, claiming to have compromised the company to steal over 2 terabytes of data, including employees' personal information, sensitive medical records, financial records, and government identification documents like passports and birth certificates. They have more than 5,000 employees and delivers healthcare services to 500,000 patients across the UK. And the company has declined to say how many individuals were affected.
And our last one is a little different. We've covered stories like this before. Stalkerware apps Coco Spy and Spyic, I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce that, are exposing phone data of millions of people. A security researcher discovered a vulnerability in the two apps, which expose the personal data of users. The bug allows anyone to access messages, photos, call logs, and other sensitive information from compromised devices. The article did not disclose the details of the vulnerability because they said it was very trivial to exploit and they basically didn't want to make things worse. The exact number of people impacted wasn't disclosed, but the researchers said they found 2.65 million email addresses between the two apps. Other data, like I said, included messages, photos, call logs, and email addresses of users who signed up for the apps. The data was provided to Troy Hunt, who confirmed that they were all unique email addresses. Here's what I thought was interesting, just to kind of quote the article a little bit. Much like other kinds of spyware, products like Coco Spy and Spyic are designed to remain hidden on a victim's phone while covertly and continually updating their device's data to a dashboard visible by the person who planted the app. By nature of how stealthy spyware can be, the majority of phone owners are likely unaware that their devices have been compromised. And the article also says the apps are differently branded but share largely the same source code. So this is probably the same company just running multiple apps.
X, formerly known as Twitter, is blocking links to Signal contact pages. So if you've ever used Signal, you actually have a link in your profile that you can send to someone. It's a signal.me link, and anyone with the link kind of just allows you to message them directly. It's kind of like Telegram links. T.me, I think, is what Telegram uses. These were blocked. Zitter is blocking links to secure Signal contact pages, and this is according to journalist Matt Binder and other first-hand accounts. The article notes that Signal's become popular with government whistleblowers. The article says links to Signal handles are not being censored, as well as links to Signal's main site.
This next story says Google ad tech users can target national security decision makers and people with chronic diseases. This comes from Wired. This is an investigation that found that Google's advertising platform, Display and Video 360, or DV360, is allowing companies to target sensitive information about Americans, including national security decision makers and people with chronic diseases. This information is being shared with advertisers despite Google's own rules against it. There's a lot of concerns about this. You can target people with health conditions, financial status, and employment status. It's just a reminder about how data brokers are creating complex dossiers on each and every one of us, including credit card transactions, social media posts, and web tracking data. And this can be used to identify and target specific individuals. That'll take us into the FOSS section. And I think I'll actually take both of these because they're really short. So the first one, Firefox is reviving progressive web apps. So this comes from the Techlore forums, and it comes from a video that a user shared, and they provided links and everything. I'm going to go ahead and quote the relevant part. Basically, this came from a post from a product manager at Firefox, and they said, as the Firefox leadership team mentioned in the Reddit AMA last week, we're taking a fresh look at PWAs, which have long been a top request from our Mozilla Connect community. And then he basically outlines how they are hoping to implement PWAs. And then the other one's real quick. This comes from Threema. It says, emoji reactions are here. So anyone who uses Threema knows that up until now, you can emoji react to messages, but it's really just thumbs up and thumbs down. But now they are rolling out emoji reactions of all kinds. So it works just like any other app. You hold it down like you're going to react, but then there's like a little option to select more, and your emoji library pops up, and you can react with question marks, exclamation points, head exploding faces, flags, fruit, like whatever emoji is in your phone, you can respond.
All right, so we have some misfits. The first one is a Signal update fends off a phishing technique used in Russian espionage. So Google has warned of a Russian espionage trick used to obtain Ukrainians' messages on the encrypted platform Signal. Now, how this worked is the technique exploits a Signal feature that allows users to join a group by scanning a QR code from their phone. The hackers would spoof these group invites in the form of QR codes that hide JavaScript commands, which link the victim's phone to a new device controlled by an eavesdropper. Signal has rolled out an update for iOS and Android to counter this trick, which warns users when they link a new device and checks with them again at a randomized interval to confirm that they still want to share all messages with it. Signal now requires a form of authentication, like entering a password or using Face ID or Touch ID on iOS to add a new linked device.
And our last story of the week, a Beverly Hills plastic surgeon is being sued for not telling patients that attackers stole their nude photos. So this is a class action lawsuit alleging that the surgeon failed to protect his patient's sensitive information after his database was hacked twice in less than a year. The attacks occurred in October 2023 and March 2024 and resulted in the exposure of personal information, including nude photos, on the dark web. The American Medical Association found in 2019 that 83% of doctors in the US had experienced some kind of cyber attack, and the FBI released a public service announcement in October 2023 warning it says here plastic surgeons, but I think it's actually all medical professionals, of the risks of hacking and data breaches.
And that's it for the week. Definitely some interesting stuff happening in the UK with Apple, and we will definitely keep you updated because I don't think that story's over. And Signal is in the headlines, not once, but twice. And we hope that we were able to satisfy your Signal stories for the week. Again, if you enjoy what we do, we really couldn't do it without your support. I just did taxes for last year, and it's still the #1 way that we get support for this podcast. It's all of you. So all of you people make this happen. And the least we can do is offer some perks for all the support that you do to keep us active. We just couldn't do it without you all. If you want to support us and keep this going and for another strong year, patreon.com/surveillancepod. We also have some perks there, like a private Signal group just for all of you who are on Patreon. And we also have like extended versions of these episodes. We're also on Liberapay, and we also support Monero. And you can also send us questions and join our Q&A on Patreon and on XMR Chat with Monero. Thank you all for listening, and I think that's all I have this week. So links are always down below, show notes, any story that you think we should cover. We have an email on our website that you can contact to send us stories. And of course, share it around, get subscribed, leave us a rating. Those things really help, and we do read them, so we really appreciate any love you could send our way. That's all I got, and we'll see you next week.